My name is Erika Anne Hayfield, and I am the lead author for the chapter Migration and Mobility in the report Gender Equality in the Arctic. I work at the University of the Faroe Islands, and I am an associate professor at the university. The Faroe Islands is a small place with only 50,000 people. Like some other regions of the Arctic, it's small in nature, and like many other Arctic regions, experiences outmigration. I myself was, as a young woman, one of those who outmigrated from the Faroe Islands and have chosen to come back. I left to study abroad. I went to Scotland, and in the Faroe Islands we have a culture of migration, in that it is very common for young people to leave the islands, often to study. But we see in particular that it tends to be young women who leave. Now, more latterly, we have experienced substantial return migration, which is good for our population figures, and we also have increased immigration of people who don't have their origins here. So luckily the population is increasing. However, in many other areas of the Arctic, there is in some places a rather substantial outmigration, and it is often young women who leave. So in terms of the gender balance or the sex ratio in the Arctic, we see that there is an unequal, or we could say a skewed sex ratio, meaning that there are fewer women than men in the Arctic. Of course, this has implications for the future sustainability of the Arctic, because with a skewed sex ratio, with too few young people, the Arctic is in the long term not socially sustainable. However, in our report we investigate migration and mobility in the Arctic because there are various patterns of migration in the Arctic, and the reasons why people move within the Arctic, or indeed leave the Arctic or immigrate to the Arctic, are complex and different. People move for educational reasons or for work, but they also move for family and for reasons of social mobility. They move because of subsistence, and they move to travel, and so on and so on. So the reasons are complex, and people in the Arctic are continuously on the move. We shed light on some of these issues in the chapter Migration and Mobility, and we pose questions. Who's actually moving? To where? And what are the reasons they move? Who are the people that immigrate to the Arctic, and why do they do that? Now, one key theme in the chapter is that we see that these reasons for moving, both in terms of work-related mobility but also in terms of migratory activity, are highly gendered. So there is definitely a need to explore these issues from a gender perspective. Unfortunately, until now, we know relatively little about these issues from a gendered perspective. And certainly there are a range of voices which don't seem to have been conveyed or heard in the literature. And this is not just the voices of women and men or young people, but also the voices of LGBTQ plus groups and Indigenous people. So we try to bring in some of these voices and point to the need to explore migration and mobility by taking into account gender and other intersectional approaches. In the chapter, which is structured into 3 main sections, the first section addresses overall issues in terms of migration, that is out-migration, but also we look at immigration and work-related mobility. Being able to be mobile, to access work, of course, is a fundamental issue if one is to be able to live in the Arctic. In the second section, we address each of the 9 regions in turn and bring out certain specific issues pertaining to those regions. Throughout the entire report, we also address Indigenous issues as well. In the final section, we point to certain policy relevant highlights, and in particular also the need to gain further knowledge about migration and mobility from a gendered perspective. So we hope that you will find the chapter interesting, and we hope that it can give rise to discussion and be implicated in policy and as well future research.